Today we're going to talk about how to create an LLC, and we're going to be walking through this checklist here behind me that I'm casting from my computer, and we're going to make it so simple for you when you're getting your LLC set up. But one of the things that you really need to focus on is how to avoid the LLC dumpster fire. Now, as we drop this down and look at this, there's some terms on here that you may not be familiar with right now, but you will by the end of this video series. Now, these are so important because a lot of times people get their LLC set up and they don't realize what they're doing, and then they have issues that pop up a year or two down the line, and those issues can be very, very costly for this new business owner. So we're going to be talking about things such as piercing the corporate veil, registered agents, commingling funds, pass-through taxation, how the LLC renewal process works, and businesses, licenses, and permits. Now, to understand all this up here, what you need to truly understand is this item down here, which is what an LLC actually does for your business. So that's where we're going to start off in this video here. And we're going to be going through a checklist of things to set up your LLC as well. But why don't we get started with this concept right here? First thing I want to talk about are two things. One is the fact that an LLC offers limited liability protection because it is a limited liability company. And it also offers pass-through taxation. We're going to be covering both of these things. To better understand this, why don't we talk about owning a coffee shop in a hypothetical scenario, but without an LLC and what that looks like. Here what you can see is there's a person in the middle here, and this person is a business owner, but on the left-hand side, they have their personal home, personal car, personal bank account attached to them. And on the right-hand side, they have their business assets. It's the cafe, the coffee shop, the point of sale, the business bank account, the espresso machine, the lights. Everything is connected to the business owner when you own that coffee shop without the LLC. Now, when you own an LLC that owns the coffee shop, it looks very different. Now what we have is we have those personal assets on the left-hand side, the bank account, personal home, personal car. And on the right-hand side, we have all those business assets we just talked about. But the red line in the middle is really important. What that red line, that division between your personal and business assets is that is something called the corporate veil. Now, you'll remember that we talked about piercing the corporate veil up here. Why don't we click that, because we're going to talk about that right now. What happens is let's say hypothetically somebody were to get injured at your coffee shop and they hire an attorney to sue you. And what that attorney is going to try to do is try to find cracks in your LLC. These are different things that you may not have set up correctly, different issues that you may have had throughout the process of owning your LLC. And if they find a crack and a judge agrees with them, they're going to be able to do something called piercing the corporate veil, pierce the corporate veil. What ends up happening is this red division line right here that we're using to represent that disappears. And then they can come after not only your business assets, but your personal assets as well. Now, that's why it's so important to make sure that you have your LLC set up correctly. One example of this that I can give right now is commingling funds. Sometimes people don't get this business bank account set up right away. And then what ends up happening is they run business transactions through their personal bank account. That's called commingling funds. And when you do that, you're creating a crack in your LLC. An attorney learns that you've been doing this. What they can do then is pierce the corporate veil and come after your personal assets. So that's why it's so important to just understand all of these items here. We're going to work through all of this throughout this video playlist. Next, I want to talk about, though, the explanation of pass-through taxation, because a lot of people are unfamiliar with this if it's your first LLC that you're creating. And basically what that is we'll stick with the Acme Coffee LLC. Let's say in the first year, you grossed $140,000 of income, you had expenses of $90,000, and net income of $50,000. First of all, I would much rather earn a net income of $50,000 in your first business year than like making $120,000 at a job, because you can always optimize this business year 2, year 3, and get better and better as you go, which is hard to do in a job. You can't like just accelerate your income. So good on you for starting an LLC and betting on yourself. Like, I love seeing that with people. Now, in this example, that $50,000 in net income, the way that that's going to be taxed is the IRS is taxing the individual, the business owner. That $50,000 net income passes through. It's also called flow-through taxation. It passes through to the business owner, and the IRS is taxing the business owner. They're not taxing the LLC as a separate entity. I just wanted to make you aware of that because that's helpful when it comes to tax time. Now, why don't we close this up right here and then get into the checklist for starting your own LLC. This right here is what we're going to be talking about through the rest of this video. And the number one thing here is get this checklist for yourself and explore bonus and glossary. Now, this is a free checklist available to you. There's a QR code on the screen. There's also a link in the description below. But there's some cool things about this as well. So why don't we take a look at the bonuses down here? What you can see is there's an AI chatbot. The reason that this is really helpful is the way that you set up an LLC is different in every state. So let's say you do start an LLC in, let's pick Kansas, right? This chatbot is going to pull information and give you a detailed checklist of specifically what you need to know in your state. And you can do this for any state. Now, if you have questions like how do I register an EIN, it'll explain that for you. And later in this video series, we're also going to explain what EINs are so you can figure out the right path for setting that up for your business. Now, another cool thing here is there's a free charitable opportunity, which we'll talk about in the next video. This yearly accounting calendar is something that you can save to your phone, is what I'd recommend, but it has all the important accounting dates when it comes to owning an LLC. There's also future tax savings, which we'll get into. The glossary of terms, really helpful. If I gloss over something, I say something in this video, you can go here to check out these different terms and how that may apply to your situation. Now, I want to talk about deciding which route you should go. State, LLC services, also just online legal tools, I call it, and business attorney. The next video in the series, and this is a playlist because I really want to deep dive on this so that you know everything you need to know when setting up your LLC. So we're going to have an entire video on it. But what I'll say here is that if you're picking the state website, the advantage there is that there's no upsells. The disadvantage is it's very difficult. It's not as seamless as going through an online legal tool or an LLC service. Now, if you go through these online legal tools, everything's going to be much more seamless, but there's a lot of upsells. There might be things that you don't necessarily need when you're getting your business set up, and you're like, well, I don't want that service, but do know that most of these services now offer a basic package that starts at $0 plus state fee, and then it goes up from there. And then a business attorney is going to be very expensive. Figure $1,000, $2,000 to get your LLC set up. But that may be the right path for you depending on how complex your situation is. Do you have a business partner? Do you have employees in and out of state? These type of things. These are all things we're going to cover in detail in the next video. But I just wanted to make you aware that there are really 3 different options you can go. And for the sake of this video, we're going to focus right now on going the state website route. And then we'll just go through and do an example for you as we go. Now, what you need to do is decide on a business name for your LLC. The things that you need to know here, the first one is it needs to be unique within your state. You can't have an LLC name that somebody else already has in your state. It's also worth Googling the name just to make sure that there's not like a trademark on it, right? Like maybe there's not a Nike in Kansas, but you can't be like, hey, we're Nike in Kansas and sell shoes. That's a poor example. But the other thing worth considering too is a lot of times people put a lot of pressure on themselves to have like the perfect name. What I'd recommend is you can use like a OpenAI chat GPT type tool to help brainstorm names, but you don't really need the perfect name. Like your LLC name could just be like, let's use the coffee shop example, and Acme Coffee LLC, right? Not a great name. But then you can have a brand name that exists underneath that LLC. This is something called a fictitious name or a DBA, doing business as. That may be Espresso Yourself, cafe, something like that. That brand name is the one that people are going to see and is more important. So don't stress yourself out about having the perfect LLC name. But once you have a name picked out, you're going to have to search the availability of it. And what you can see here is there's a state directory here. And when you click on this, you can find your state and then figure out if that LLC is taken. What we're going to do is just stick with Alabama because it's the first one in alphabetical order here. And in this case, it pops this open. So in Alabama, if I was to do like Roll Tide, right? Very good chance that that name is taken. And look at all these Roll Tide, right? And you can notice there are different variations, like there's a car wash and auto sales and logistics. But if you wanted to do Roll Tide car wash, that is gone. But if I go back here and now just kind of go crazy on the keyboard and search that, now what you'll see is there are no matches found. That's what you're looking for. Your state website is going to look different, but when you go through this directory, you can find the resources to be able to search your name and see if it's available. Now, let's assume that your name's available. You're all set to go. We're going to get started creating your LLC. And what we're going to do is there's a little half step that you can do, which is registering your LLC name. What that basically is like, let's say you're not ready to form your LLC yet, but you want to make sure you get that name. You don't want anyone else to take it. It's kind of like buying a domain name, but you know that you're going to set up the website later. You can do that in most states. You can register that name ahead of time. But as far as creating your LLC, the most important thing is writing your articles of organization and then filing that articles of organization with the Secretary of State, which also requires a fee. So again, there's a state directory on here. And once again, we will just go to Alabama. But basically, your articles of organization, this could be something that you can print up as a PDF and mail it in if you want. But all the state websites allow you to go on the state website and just do it digitally as well, which I'd recommend. And they're going to ask you things such as your company name, your address, registered agent, which we'll get to in a minute, duration, purpose, management, tax treatment, and an authorized signature. Now, one of the tough things with the state websites, again, going back to Alabama, in this case, they have a Secretary of State filing fee of $200. Every state has a filing fee. There's really no way around it. You're going to pay that if you go through the state website, if you go through online legal tools, or if you go through a business attorney, you are paying that state fee, but it varies by state. Now, what you can see here is we have a domestic LLC formation, and they also have the name reservation. So that name reservation is the thing we were talking about before, where you can actually register your LLC name. But in this particular case, we're going to do all of it together here and click on the domestic LLC. Now, this document here is going to look different in different states, all right? But what I did want to do is I wanted to highlight a couple items on here. Because number one is just your LLC name. Number two is a copy of the name reservation certificate. So in Alabama, they're requesting that you have that already done and then do it. Some states don't require that. They kind of lump it all together in one process with your articles of organization. Others do. But this is where I think it gets tough with the state websites. It says the name of the registered agent, only one agent, street, no PO boxes, address, must be located in Alabama. Now, every registered agent, sometimes it's called something different. It may be called a resident agent, statutory agent, has different names. But basically what that is a third-party service, and they handle important documentation and communication for your business. And then what they do is, like, let's say in the example that you're being sued, right? The attorney is like sending notifications and letters to you. They're going to make sure that you get those letters. And eventually, if you get a service of process notice, what that means is you have to show up in court. Well, that registered agent is going to help make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So it's really important that you're doing these things. And again, so you don't have cracks in your LLC. Now, the bummer here is they do give you a little bit of information. In every state, that registered agent has to exist, have a physical mailing address in your state, and it cannot be a PO box. But they don't tell you, like, hey, like, who should you use? Like, are there services available for this? A lot of times these online legal tools partner with registered agent services, and even some of them provide you that service for free for the first year. In my opinion, the state websites just don't do a great job of educating you and explaining things as you go through the process. But then you're going to go on here and check only if the type applies to the limited liability company being formed. These typically aren't going to apply for most people. A series LLC, I'll talk about that for a quick second, and we'll get to that in the next video as well, but that may be helpful if you're like buying a bunch of rental properties and you own different rental properties. You may have one series LLC and then sub LLCs underneath it. But those are things like that's where talking to an attorney might make sense when you have a more complex situation. Most of them will have the filing of the limited LLC date. Typically, you don't have to put a date. You can just have it be today, like I certify this as of today. But if you did want to push it out for some reason, that may be effective for you. Where that typically comes into play is, like, let's say it's December 1st and you're like, I actually don't want to have this LLC in December. I don't mind if it starts in January. You can make it January 2 of the next year. That can help you save on renewal fees as well, which again, we're going to talk about in a future video. Now, this is them gathering extra information. You don't necessarily have to tell them this. You know, you can choose not to. You have the $200 formation fee. Choose one of the following: check, money order, or charge fee to a prepaid account, credit card type, etc. And then what you'll do is you'll be able to mail this in, or again, go on the state website, file your articles of organization that way. Now, as we already mentioned right here, we got into registered agents. Just want to knock that off and then also pass through taxation. But we're going to get into these two items here in a minute as well. All right, now creating and signing an LLC operating agreement. Currently, there are 5 states that require this when you're forming your LLC. So most states don't require it. But this is a situation where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, let's say that you had a partner with you in this Acme Coffee LLC, and you do really well. You end up having like 15 locations, and about 8 years down the line, your partner says, you know what, my life has changed. I want out of the business. How do you determine what the value of that is for that person? How do they exit the business? Something like an LLC operating agreement will spell out who the members of it are, what are their roles and responsibilities. You can even address things such as exit plan if somebody wants out of the LLC. And it may take you a little bit of time, and there's boilerplate templates online that you can find, and most of the online legal services offer that. or you can go through a business attorney and really dial it in. And it's going to cost you a little bit of extra time and money to do this up front, but it can cost tens of thousands of dollars in litigation down the line if you don't already have these things spelled out day one. So I highly suggest getting that set up. And like I said, this is something where the state websites aren't going to have this for you, but most of the online legal tools will have like a boilerplate template that you can use, or you can go through a business attorney for doing that. Now, after you get your LLC set up, there's a few things that you need to consider. You need to set up an EIN here, and there's an IRS link, and also the LLC Services online will handle this for you as well. But if you're not familiar, an EIN is an employer identification number. What that means is it's like a social security number for your business that's designated by the IRS so they can identify your business. This is required when you have payroll. If you have employees on payroll, you're going to need an EIN. There's other situations where it's required as well, but it also makes your business look more professional. Let's say that you're applying for a business bank account. If you already have that EIN, you can just put that information in instead of your social security number. If you're looking for business loans, business insurances, you're trying to rent out a space, these are all things that are going to make you look more professional. So getting that EIN set up day one is a great idea, and it's pretty easy to do. This right here will walk you through exactly how to do it. Now, next, what we want to do is obtain business licenses and permits for your LLC. I believe we mentioned that up here at this spot. The reason that this is so important is a lot of people will get their LLC set up and they think like, oh, I'm good to go. I'm registered with the state. I can launch this business. And then they end up getting a fine because they're actually operating a business that required a license or permit. A really easy example for this is like, let's say you're starting a brewery, right? You're brewing beer, you're distributing beer, and you're also serving beer. There may be different licenses and permits that are needed for those different activities, and they may be required on the town or city level. They could be on the county level, the state level, or even the federal level. That's why we have these different levels here mentioned. Now, what you can do is start on the lowest level. Like let's say it's in your town. You can call the town clerk and say, hey, I'm looking at doing this. What do I need to know as far as licenses and permits? Do you know anything on the state level or county level as well? And then you can also Google research these things and then look to see if there's anything on the federal level that you may need. Again, the state website's not going to help you with this because they don't care about your local town and they don't care about the federal level of things. Most of the online LLC services will provide the research and give you recommendations on how to get all this set up, but it's usually an additional fee. But again, it's just another way that those online legal tools will help to support you in different ways that the state website cannot. Now, what we're going to be talking about in the next video is a few things here. We're going to get into the fees associated with setting up your LLC. Really cool. We've built an actual LLC cost calculator. And the way this works is, in this particular case, you can select Alabama. It's going to show you the top 5 LLC services and what it costs down to the dollar to own that LLC. But it's also in the second block down here, going to look at your state fees, and it's going to tell you your state filing fee, and really importantly, it's going to get into your annual fee or a biannual fee, which we'll cover in the next video, and also all the extra fees that are sometimes associated with setting up your LLC. The next thing we're going to get into is a star ratings right here. We're just going to explain going through the state website, online LLC services, or business attorneys. And we're going to break this down for you. Also, why state websites become a pain. We're going to explain domestic and foreign LLCs. And then next, what we're going to explain here is questions worth asking. So this is typically like, when would you want to talk to a business attorney or at least start a conversation with a CPA? And we're going to be deep diving on all that in the next video. Again, I highly suggest you getting a copy of this Notion doc for yourself. There'll be a link in the description below. And I'll catch you in this next video as we deep dive on which path makes the most sense for your situation. I'll catch you in the next video.